I am delighted to have a commissioner from a neighboring county, city that's not too close to from here, but it's still close enough for me to consider it part of our community, the city of Coral Springs. We have the Honorable Commissioner Nancy Metayer.
Yes.
It's an outstanding person. First of all, a little bit about Nancy, but I don't want to talk too much about that because I want you to speak about yourself and promote yourself as we get into this conversation.
I
Okay?
appreciate that.
All right, outstanding. So, the good commissioner is the first Haitian American to be elected to the city of Coral Springs at the commission. Bravo,
Yes.
well done.
Thank you.
On top of that, she is an advocate, a person who started in politics through her public service, working for a charter school.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So that's going to fit with the conversation that we're talking about school safety and policing, how things have changed
Right.
since the Marjorie Stoneman tragedy.
Right.
Which I know your city played an integral role, not just in the response to the incident,
but the healing process too.
follow-up.
Yep.
Right? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But please help me out here because you're an environmental expert.
Scientist.
Right?
Yes.
On top of that, something that I found very interesting in your background is that you are part of a emergency preparedness, emergency planning consortium, group of experts, which is so key to responding to post-tragic incidents, both in the response, but also the better part of the prevention, right? So without further ado, Nancy, welcome.
Thank you
let's
for
get this
having me.
conversation started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I can't wait to really dig into this conversation, a much needed conversation, especially 3 years post the tragedy. And my community is actually still healing. So yeah, let's dig into it.
And before we get started, I want to give a shout out to a young lady that I really admire, a person that connected us. Her name is Ria Khan. She's sitting off to the side, off screen. But thank you, Ria.
We all love Ria.
Yeah, she's a good lady. So having said that, Nancy, help me out here because tell me about when you first heard of the tragedy at the school, at that Parkland and at the Marjorie Stoneman High School. Tell me where you were, what was going on, and the response, the city's response to the incident.
Yeah, so the first whiff of the news, I was in a staff meeting.
Were you elected already?
I was not elected.
Okay.
I was in a staff meeting at a local nonprofit. I was the climate justice program manager, and headlines came in, and immediately it went to my brother. My brother was a student at that time, a senior, and I stepped out, called my mother, called my brother, of course, panicked because I did not hear from my brother, and my mom was panicking as well. So I was trying to calm her down, we were all in a family group chat, and we were just going back and forth. Donovan, are you okay? Are you okay? So immediately left, got on in the nonprofits in South Florida, in Miami particularly, got on I-95 and sped as quickly as I can.
That must have been the longest ride of your life.
The longest ride. And in between that, we're all calling, trying to figure out where he is he okay? As soon as I got on the Sawgrass Expressway, I got notification that my brother was okay. And that, thank God, he was not in school at that time, and he made it home safely. So, but my thoughts went immediately to, whoa, I have neighbors who attend that school. My neighbor of over 21 years is a teacher at that school. So my thoughts immediately went to them. Is X, Y, and Z okay? Is X, Y, and Z responded to my mom's text messages? So from there, my brother was home. We stood by the TV and watched and waited. And my brother had friends in that class, and he was trying to figure out if they were okay. As the strategy continued to unfold, we learned that we lost 17 victims that day, as well as the recovery. Yeah. Our police department, Coral Springs Police Department, was the first at the scene. Were able to do what they needed to do to make sure our constituents were safe, students were safe, and that they were getting the information as it became available.
Yeah, and it's really important to note, no knock on the sheriff's office. But the reality is that the Coral Springs Police Department, not just based on news, but what has been revealed post investigation, post incident, played the integral part of. I'm getting chills thinking about this, remembering this, because they played an integral part in the rapid response, the rapid entry that was to go after the subject, right? To go after the subject and stop the killing or stop the shooting. Forever, as a person who spent the majority part of my life in military and police, I will be grateful to the Coral Springs Police Department, their preparedness, the officers on the scene, and the city leadership for what you guys did.
At that time, we had interim mayor because our mayor had just formally passed away. Our vice mayor at that time, Joy Carter, was actually her leadership actually carried our city, made sure that everyone was informed, parents got the information that they needed. She stepped up in a huge way for our city. And then again, we have to give kudos to the mayor at the time, Parkland, now our state representative, Christine Haskotsky.
Yeah.
She definitely stepped up in a leadership role. I don't know about you, but I know that women, when you put them in the position of leadership, we are able to execute in an effective way. So I want to give kudos to those ladies for stepping forward. And after that, we see a lot of healing that continued to happen. Coral Springs was granted a Bloomberg grant. We were able to do a healing sculpture, a series. We had a yellow carpet to basically walk with our neighbors down. We had the burning of a building that the city had not building, but a sculpture that everybody in the community had a hand in. We were able to assemble slowly and then watch it come down as we lit fire to really symbolize new beginnings.
So you have the community is so close to Parkland, right? I mean, the jurisdiction is just next door, right?
Right. Sister cities.
Yes, good way of putting it. And I take it after the incident, and obviously you got elected, but since you've been elected, what have been the changes that you can see that have been significant when it comes to school safety that should be noted that the public maybe is not aware of?
So our city is doing a huge emphasis on mental health awareness. It's very important that we not only address the issue or the elephant in the room, but we address that there is a mental health issue in our communities and it's a stigma. And we need to break down that stigma and we need to give resources. We need to ensure that our community not only is healing from the trauma, PTSD, survivor's guilt. There has been a number of suicides after the incident that folks are getting the services that they need. Eagles Haven is one community partner that works closely with our community to provide those services. I would love to see that more in our schools because our children are hurting right now, not only because of this gun violence situation, PTSD, but also with COVID. And all of that is just piling on. So would love to see more of that. I'm not saying that the conversations aren't happening, but I don't think they're happening as quickly as folks would like them to happen.
You know, it's interesting because while I was in the legislature, the irony is that just before Parkland occurred, I introduced an amendment to a bill that would have called for added money to go to resources like mental health. I remember the legislature, the leadership killing that amendment, right? And the bill sponsor killing it because, they thought that enough funding was going to school safety. But at the time it was 60 some odd $1 million for the 67 counties. And it wasn't equally distributed amongst the counties. There were some counties that were receiving less than 100,000. Some counties were receiving, Dade County was receiving about 10 million, but nevertheless, it was not equally distributed. Now, post-Parkland, the conversations began to heat up about that. And I agree with you. There's not enough commitment right now
Mhm.
to funding these programs. What particular programs do you think would be of most benefit at this time to these communities that are underserved, these individuals who are walking amongst us that are hurting?
For one program that I would love to see is the Cahoots program.
The what
That the
program?
Cahoots program
Okay.
that actually had implemented in the Oregon, Washington State area around policing and mental health, showing up, making sure that we're using our resources well. So if we want our police to do their job, right? We don't want them to carry on this burden, right? So having social workers and folks who are able to address mental health issues, instead of having our police officers depending on police officers to provide that services. So really allocating funds to having more social services for our first responders in our schools, in areas that don't have the equity or the resources for them to thrive. So I think us putting fund or funneling funds into that program would help all our communities across the board, because not only are you assisting our emergency responders, but you're also providing it on the most local level. Some folks aren't able to afford mental health care, and that is an issue that we need to talk about. One issue that I think that we need to really dig into is ensuring that we are having real conversations around gun violence, and ensuring that we're closing those loopholes of folks who are able to get access to these particular rifles, particular weapons. So those are conversations we need to start having. Another one is our SROs in our schools. Are they properly equipped to provide the needs of our students? And some folks will say that, unfortunately, in certain communities, it's a hard conversation to have because Black and Brown students don't feel safe around SROs as well. So it's very, very delicate. And I think it's important that we mirror the needs of each of these communities and not think that one solution fits all. So it's important to continue having these
I
conversations.
totally agree that we need to break down the barriers, right?
Right.
Because it's all about communication, building
Right.
relationships. And, you know, as a kid, I felt a little uncomfortable with the police. And then here I am, I become a police officer, mainly because I wanted to break down some of those barriers.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I'm sitting next to a city commissioner, hopefully to be county commissioner, hopefully to be something, at a larger level, because we need this type of fresh mentality, this type of fresh approach. Um, you mentioned about police officer training. I can remember when I first started in law enforcement in 1989, an SRO position was basically a retired on the duty position, where once you got reached a certain age, not all SROs, but there was some SROs that they'd already been burnt out on the street. They put them in the schools, right? Because the schools were not considered dangerous. I always disagree with that mentality, and I think that the SROs should be the highest trained officers,
Yep.
not just in police tactics, but also human skills, the skill sets in communicating with, their base, their community.
Yeah.
Um,
And identifying these issues with our students early on, right? If we
Yeah.
have that community communication between your students and your officer, they may be able to pinpoint, hey, this is not anger. This is an issue that's deeper than a student here who is lashing out. They need some tender love and care.
Yeah.
What can we do to help them? And we saw that with Parkland. Like, he suffered from mental health. He was he was admitted into the Promise program for kids who are lashing out in class,
Yeah.
but there was underlying issues that we weren't able to identify because we didn't have the resources to identify those issues.
Often people speak about smaller government, and I'm all for smaller government. I'm for efficient, accountable, responsible government. But this issue of smaller government, we 2011, former Governor Rick Scott eliminated $1.3 billion from public education, statewide funding. And as a result, we saw a trickle-down effect where counselors were no longer in schools, elimination of subs, elimination of some of these safety net programs. What we should have had was an assessment and a streamlining of those programs, right? So, one of the best trainings I ever attended in law enforcement was called the oh my God, I forget, but it was around mental health. right? And CIT training, that's what it was. And the CIT training put the officers in the shoes of somebody that had mental problems. Specifically, I remember one exercise where we were put in the place of somebody's hearing voices, right? And the exercise was real simple, and you try it. Sit there, hold a conversation with somebody else, and then have a couple of people standing on both sides of you, talking to you. Something that makes no sense, that has nothing to do with the conversation, and try to concentrate on what that person's telling you. That taught the officers that when they're coming across someone who is not listening to them, obeying what they feel are clear and concise, orders, that it might not be purposely done. That the person might be suffering from
schizophrenia.
Yeah, delusional. And I thought that was one of the most important, most impactful trainings in my life. Can you think of other resources, other tools that we can give our law enforcement, our teachers, our community that would benefit protecting and improving the school safety?
I think that we should have better streamline of conversations amongst each other. There's not a space where police officers, teachers, counselors could all come together and talk about the issues that they're facing. I think that would eliminate a lot of the barriers in the classrooms and also in our school system, right? If a teacher is able to say, hey, I'm dealing with this. How can you better assist me in this space? And really tell your colleagues about this and what I'm experiencing in the classroom. I think that would go a long way. I know teachers at the moment feel overwhelmed. They have to be teachers, counselors, nurses, and now they have to protect and shield their students in their classrooms. And that is a huge burden on them. And if we can really eliminate a few of those burdens, they'll be able to be more effective educators, right? So starting at that, how we communicate with each other is number one. Number two, just really ensuring that not only our teachers are being heard, but they're being supported. If our teachers are telling you, hey, I'm not comfortable with carrying a gun in a classroom, we shouldn't continue having that conversation on a state level, pushing teachers to carry armed weapons. I know that has died down, but that is something that was proposed without the consent of educators. So that's
I was on the floor.
Yeah.
Just to give you, I remember when, after a couple days after the MSD shooting, members of leadership coming to me, because I was former law enforcement, asking me to sign on to what became the bill 7026, I believe it was, that created the Guardian program. It was pretty much going to mandate an armed staff member in the school. And I thought, my God, no matter how much training you give these people, and some of them are very apt and capable of carrying a firearm and dealing with these situations, but do we really want our teachers to be the ones that are frontline protectors? Or do we really want them to be the teachers and educators that we hired them to be?
Right.
I mean, we need to do better.
A lot better. Another example, I'll wrap it up, is ensuring that we have access of in-school counseling. I think that would go a long way. I'm having a bad day. I need to talk to someone. For every counselor to student ratio in our schools now, it's impossible to have at least 30 minutes with your guidance counselor. Think of if we had in-school counseling, how many people we would be able to help, how many issues we would be able to resolve, how many needs we would be able to meet. I think that's another great way for us to enter the school and provide that mental health assistance that our students need.
Yeah, no doubt. And the shooter, which I will not mention his name at MSD, like the shooters of other mass casualty incidents, because it's not just schools. It can be anywhere. It could be at the theater. It was in Aurora, Colorado at the theater.
El Paso, at the mall.
Yeah, at the airport.
At the airport.
So there are many amongst us who is dangerous, and we need to make sure we identify them and have the best possible tools and resources available to deal with them appropriately. Commissioner, I want to call you Nancy because I want to personalize you to the audience, because I think
it is okay. You can call me Nancy.
I think as long as we personalize our elected officials, then it's easier to approach them.
Right.
And if our audience or anybody out there that sees this video would like to get a hold of you, where can they get a hold of you?
They can send me a text message or give me a call at 954-254 8880. You can find me on all social media, Nancy Metayer on IG, Facebook, and Twitter. Or you can send me an email at nmetayer, that's N as in Nancy, M as in Mary, E as in elephant, T as in tiger, A as in apple, Y as in yellow, E as in elephant, R as in red, at coralsprings.org.
I like that. Wow. An elected official gives you their number. Think about that.
Yeah.
How often does that happen?
Not very often, but I'm pretty accessible. I would love to continue having conversation because you don't know what you don't know. And me being better and ensuring that I'm meeting your needs is really hearing from you.
Well, I'd love to continue the conversation. That was the next question. If you'd like to join us in these follow-up conversations that we will be having,
Absolutely.
let's get some more people to the table, a cross section of our community, maybe some community people, stakeholders, right?
Absolutely.
All at all levels.
And that's how we get better.
Yes, absolutely. So in our last couple seconds here, any parting words for your viewers out there?
I think we all need to focus on, we understand that these tragedies in our communities are hurting us. But if we are able to move forward and really come together as a community, we can definitely get over anything. And us leaning on each other ensures that our communities become better, that we're better for ourselves and everybody around us.
Well, having said that, I can't thank you enough for driving down from Coral Springs, and being here, taking the time to be open and transparent and speak to us about your thoughts, and thank you for serving. And one last question I must ask you. Where do we see you in 5 years?
Oh, that's a great question. Hopefully, I'll be a homeowner with a dog and a beautiful family and continue doing the work that I'm doing now. I don't know on what level of government or if and even in government, but I do plan to continue serving.
Well, there you go. You heard it from a public servant. You heard it from our elected official in a sister city, a community that's not too far from us, but it's still part of our South Florida rich, diverse community. Having said that, I can't thank everybody enough for being here. To the Millers, thank you for this opportunity. Tommy, always behind the scenes. I must always give you a shout out because you're the man that makes this thing happen. Having said that, thank you and look forward to speaking to you guys next time.